Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am thrilled to be with you here today. My name is AJ Wilms, and I am joined here with Mike Lauber. And I actually have COVID today. I have had COVID for the last couple days, but I'm going to push through this show because Mike has found some outstanding stories for us to cover. Like what, Mike?
That's right. No made in China virus has taken us down.
Exactly.
We got riots to cover in Sweden. We've got more madness with Disney. We got a variety of things to get to today, so let's get rolling right into it. Um, First, we have. I just want to demonstrate these headlines first. So, you had a politician threaten to burn a Quran, which resulted in riots in Sweden. And again, the way it's covered is always framing. It's the framing. From Time Magazine, riots in Sweden against far right injure three. Again, this ignores the fact that these are Muslims rioting in the street because somebody threatened to burn a Quran. NPR, Sweden links riots to criminal gangs that target police. No mention that they are Muslims
Yeah.
responding to this. Sweden riots over Quran burning. What's happening? It's crazy. Like Al Jazeera has the most honest headline out of these three.
Yeah, and even then it's like, oh, Sweden's rioting. It's not like, oh, a specific group of people who are living in Sweden are rioting.
Yeah. Well, exactly. It doesn't mention that it's all the migrants that they've taken in that are
Yeah.
destroying certain areas, and it's again been an ongoing problem. Uh, I know that Sweden now, because of all these refugees, like it's the westernized country you're most likely to get blown up in. Um, I read some story that you were like 40 something thousand times more likely to die from a hand grenade in Sweden than you were in the United States.
Whoa, crazy. Yeah, and
Yeah,
like the rape rate is through the roof. Sweden used to be one of the safest places in the world and even in Europe where you could live. Now they have the second highest rape rate in the world, only next to like South Africa. And it's crazy because you think of all these countries that have these issues, all these Middle Eastern countries, maybe these underdeveloped Asian countries, certainly in Africa or Central America. They do not even compete with Sweden now, and it's clearly because the Swedish people are being replaced with these refugees from these other countries. And something I'll note too, we'll talk about this more later, but like the refugees are usually like the lowest of the low in these countries. It's not like they're bringing in the doctors and lawyers and engineers of Syria. They're bringing in like the bottom of the barrel, Sunni Muslims that are revolting against the Assad regime, the Syrian government, who are trying to get into Western nations and usually are not the best and brightest.
Yeah, and you have a high percentage of fighting age men that are literally going there
Yeah.
to cause problems. It isn't even like it's just like families fleeing a war torn country. It is that you have a percentage of them that are going just to cause problems. And again, they congregate in city centers, which then destroys those areas. Because, yeah, parts of Sweden still are nice, just avoid the areas that have a high refugee population.
Yeah, I was actually talking to one of my friends from Sweden just yesterday, and I was asking him how bad things were. And he's quite wealthy, him and his family. So he was like, "Oh, we're totally fine." But yeah, country's usually on fire. Like things are not great here. But like he's like, I've never even seen a Muslim in my city because he lives way out in the middle of nowhere, again in a wealthy area. But I also know quite a lot of, when I was in university, the foreign language I took was Arabic, and I met a lot of Arabs, a lot of people from Iraq and Syria, Egypt, etc. And something I noticed is whenever I talked to the Syrian students who were from Syria, they would say things like, "We do not like the refugees. We hate the Syrian refugees." And I'm like, "But you're Syrian. Don't you like other Syrians?" And they're like, "No, the refugees are bad. Those are all the Sunni Muslims. The Alawites are the good ones who support the government. The Christians are the good ones who stay or move to America or whatever. But it's the Sunni Muslims that are the refugees, and they'll leave." This is their words, not mine. They say they leave to Western countries to send money back to Syria to fund the rebel groups like ISIS, Al Qaeda, the FSA, any of these groups that are fighting there.
Yeah, and again, this is what we've seen over and over again, that it is strategic to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And this is something else that you have now going on with people exiting other countries, whether it's Afghanistan or
Right.
yeah, anywhere, that it is fighting age people going strictly to cause trouble or go embed themselves in other societies.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's the case too. They go in under a refugee status and
Mhm.
then get themselves into some key industry with the idea they're there to either spy or cause problems later or some other way infiltrate.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I've watched on my live stream before these Syrian, not just Syrian, but all these refugees from the Middle East, and they pull up on boats to like Italy and stuff. And you can see in these little like rafts they have, not only are they all like standardized as if they're being handed out by some type of government or interest group or NGO or whatever, but they all have these standardized black rafts that look similar to what like the Navy SEALs ride on, those black
Yeah, kind of
little.
like a Zodiac.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all men. It is all, like you said, military age men, men in their early 20s, and that's really all there is on these boats. And there's no women and children. When you look at the media, they have to like try so hard to find a shot with like a woman or a child there. And I've also heard from the Syrian people I know that sometimes the guys will dress up in burqas and try to escape their country claiming to be women. Now, I'm not saying every woman in a burqa is some guy undercover, but that is allegedly something that has happened in the past where guys will put on burqas just to get out of the country because they don't want to join the military because there's conscription in many of these countries or a variety of other reasons.
Yeah, it's also that common tactic used by suicide bombers.
Oh,
Um,
really?
oh yeah, I have a friend that she was an MP. She speaks a number of different languages, and when she was stationed in Iraq, this was something that was fairly common. She got put on mosque duty to search people going in and out, and there were several times where they had suicide bombers come in dressed as women that
Mm,
they could kind of spot them ahead of time by like mannerisms, and you can usually tell it's a dude.
right.
Um, and she had to take one of them out before the guy could,
Wow.
sing the song of his people and kill all the innocent people that just wanted to walk into their mosque.
That's crazy. Wow. Yeah, and as this B-roll plays in the background, it's interesting to notice that the people rioting, they're all migrants and they're all young men. And then the people who are the police are all like, exclusively Swedish. Like you can look at the police and it's all like these blue-eyed, white, blonde-haired people. And then you look at the rioters and it's all these clearly Middle Eastern Islamic people who are burning down the place. And it really puts into perspective like as Sweden becomes more and more of an Islamic nation, which I think in something like 5 to 10 years, it's predicted to become a third world nation by its status because of how many refugees they're taking in. They just can't support it anymore, all these people. And, as the demographics change rapidly, there's going to be less and less Swedish police and more Muslim police or Muslim rioters. And it's really going to be interesting seeing where the country goes and what direction it takes.
Yeah, and well, that's something you're already seeing in the UK with refugees infiltrating the police force and then only selectively enforcing laws in different areas.
Mm,
Where I know there was the one guy that did go on trial, and I think he was convicted for killing a British woman, essentially an honor killing. Um,
wow.
that was a police officer. That was probably a year or so ago. Yeah, another big thing we're dealing with right now is I was just trying to find the time frame, but I know that we'll just call it since the beginning of the year. That there have been at least 33 people picked up on our southern border trying to cross that were on our terror watch list or otherwise people
Wow.
that we were looking for. And this is in addition to the 50 from the group of African or Afghan refugees that we brought in last year.
Wow.
So again, we're just bringing people in that want to destroy us for no apparent reason.
Yeah, I know. It's absolutely insane. And, it's not only Sweden that faces this issue, but it's many European countries. Germany is getting hit really hard. England is, the whole UK really is getting hit extremely hard. France, too. In fact, I just read a tweet today. New York Times put out an article about these Muslim women who want to wear their hijabs when they play sports or something like that. And the government was like, no, you can't wear religious attire anywhere. We're like a state secular society. Christians can't, Muslims can't, Buddhists can't, Sikhs can't. Sorry. And the Muslims are protesting. And I tweeted back, Ann Coulter originally retweeted it or quote tweeted it saying, here's an idea. Stay in your Muslim country if you want Muslim traditions. And that's a good point. And then I said, I find it funny how all of these Muslim women aren't allowed to play sports in many Islamic countries. So they'll move to the West where they can finally play sports. And then as soon as we have any standards of our own, they look at us and say, you guys need to adopt Islamic standards.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to wear your hijab, you can go back to your own country. But wait, you can't play sports there.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And
That's the ironic part.
this story was out of France, wasn't it? So like
Hmm.
again, this is a modern westernized country. It really is like people have it so good now they just have to find something to complain about.
Yeah, it really is that. And I think, with the Islamic part, and it's not just with Muslims, but there are many other groups that come to this country, or any Western country for that matter, and they do have this sense of entitlement. But I honestly feel like they are just simply acting in their own group's best interest. And in some ways, I wish Americans or Europeans or Christians would do that more. I kind of wish that Christians in France were like being more like, we're going to wear crosses whether you like it or not. I know in
Yeah.
Quebec and Canada, you're not allowed to like wear crosses if you're at the workplace, if it's a government workplace. I mean, ridiculous things that like Christians should be putting their foot down. But unfortunately, we withhold ourselves as Christians, as Europeans, etc. We allow ourselves to like play by the rules, even if it means, it's not in the best interest of our group. But then we allow all these other people in who say, well, of course we're going to do what's best for our group. Why wouldn't we? And then that's when you end up with situations like this.
Yeah, we play by the rules, whereas they use the rules to strangle us. But
Yeah, and to strengthen themselves.
yeah, exactly. Um, go ahead and move on to our next story here. So this is again something we've probably all heard about now, but Taylor Lorenz, who famously a couple weeks ago had a video of herself crying about getting bullied, uh, doxed libs of TikTok. Again, it's a big account. It's been in the news a lot lately for getting banned on Twitter. Again, for doing nothing. They're not all they're literally that proverbial mirror. They take tweets that the left has made and they just put it on blast so everybody can see it. People that aren't in that echo chamber see what these lunatics say when they're in their own little circle. But she thinks that's bullying and harassment, which is what TikTok or what Twitter banned them for.
Wow.
I believe they are finally back up now. But again, the irony here is that it's Taylor Lorenz doing this. And I'm going to play a video real quickly of her. And this is just a few weeks old, if that. I actually forgot to grab the date before we went live. But this is within the last, I'll say, 2 weeks. Oops, wrong button.
You feel like any little piece of information that gets out on you will be used by the worst people on the internet to destroy your life. And it's so isolating.
And terrifying.
It's horrifying.
Is
I'm so sorry. It's overwhelming.
I think the volume might be a little low there.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of the way it came in. I'm kind of glad it had subtitles, but you can see like the fake crying. And I believe this is an MSNBC reporter kind of coaching her along in the interview.
Yeah, Wait, is that Ellen DeGeneres?
I can't tell. I mean, it kind of looks like Justin Bieber, too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this one's a little too young to be Ellen, but they all kind of have, all the lesbians have that kind of haircut and facial structure, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it just kind of goes with the territory. Maybe that's the direction you have to go to build your look in that direction if that's what you're going to do.
Maybe, I guess so. So she was the one, she doxed libs of TikTok. Is that what happened?
Yes. And this is, again, this is what she's built her career on, is kind of bullying and gossip and doxing people.
Yeah.
But again, she has this mental breakdown, I think really just to draw attention to herself a few weeks ago about how bad it is, how she feels when people make fun of her on TikTok or call her out for this stuff, that she feels threatened, and then she cries about it. But then she goes right back.
Severe PTSD from it, too.
Yeah, apparently.
Because I guess there's mild PTSD, there's like moderate PTSD, and then there's severe PTSD.
Well, I mean, she's got to have the worst of the worst. That's how you have to frame it for the story. I guess
her. Like, you get your legs blown off in Afghanistan and all your friends died. That's like normal PTSD. But, you get bullied on the internet or people say things you don't like online. That's severe PTSD. That's like the most extreme type you can get.
Yeah, it's not from like walking through a minefield or something else that would give you like legitimate PTSD.
No, of course not.
It's somebody said mean things about me on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely absurd.
No, I agree. And again, so there's another example, like the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos' newspaper, using their power to crush somebody that's putting out stories they don't like. Just a woman that watches TikTok, posts videos to her Twitter account, and has gained a giant following because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't have competition. You can't have somebody else out there reporting the real news. I also think part of this is right now, Twitter is obviously on shaky ground with Elon Musk potentially making a going through with a hostile takeover, or drawing other members in to go and buy the organization out from under the board.
That would be great. I hope that does happen.
Yeah, because they need changes. If they want to survive, they need to be a free speech platform. But the board, who collectively only owns something like 3,000 shares of the company, it's like nothing.
Yeah.
But They see it for what it is. It's a tool for the left to suppress opposing viewpoints, and um, a lot of reporters use Twitter as a reference point, so they will reference each other for stories to then generate headlines that they want to push forward.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And then we'll move on to our next story here, a little more positive. Ron DeSantis again is the man. So they are, because of all this grooming nonsense with Disney, um, they are going to or he is proposing that they terminate a lot of these special districts, tax abatements, and other privileges that have been given to Disney really since the 1960s. They are their own district, which means it doesn't sound like a big thing, but Lake Buena Vista is the area that they're in outside Orlando, and they make all their own like environmental decisions. So normally it has to go through boards. You're paying all kinds of inspectors and other stuff every time you want to put in a new road or whatever. So they've been allowed to self-govern doing that. They have their own police departments, fire departments, everything, which again, for something that big is not that unusual. But again, it's time to look at these privileges again. If they're going to go out there and say, kindergartners should be able to get lessons on gay sex.
Yeah, yeah, and it's an interesting thing. Like, this is almost like the Ancapistan thing, where it's like now you have a company that actually is like governing a piece of land, and private police, private fire department, private. All these things are privately owned by a corporation. And like, what's one of the first things they do? It's like, let's teach six-year-olds and third graders and fourth graders about sodomy. Let's put a lot of like child LGBT things in our movie for kids. And it's like, wait a minute, maybe we should use the government to stop the company from doing that, because just allowing a company to have all that power, probably not a great thing.
Well, it's interesting too, like how much effect this anti-grooming legislation has had, because it is bringing it to people's attention. I just saw another story earlier today that is a school in, I believe, Massachusetts, where the father found out at school they were trying to get his daughter to transition into a man and his son to transition into a woman. Whoa. I don't know what grade levels these were at, but again, this was being kept from. There's another lawsuit about a school doing the same thing, telling kids that while they were at school, they can have their own name and their identity, and it'll be a secret. So again, the effort is to keep it away from parents. Yeah. The only reason they're doing that is because they already know it's bad behavior, that it's not appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. Like, back in the day, I feel so old now, but back in the day, you used to wish, like, you knew it was bad when the school was like, oh, we're not going to tell your parents about this, but now it's seen as something positive, right? If you were a parent and the school was keeping secrets about your child that you would want to know, that would be like universally understood as something negative and bad. Like, the behavior is not proper. The parents should know about it to address it. But now it's being spun as if it's something good. Like, teachers keeping secrets with children is now something good. Of course not. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, we can't have these old-fashioned rude parents getting in the way of their kids' modern gender identities. That's how they want to spin it. The parents just don't understand. This is what these kids want. Well, that's obviously not reality. We wouldn't have this uptick in mental disorders that wasn't being pushed from somewhere. I don't think people are, and the reason they want to talk to young kids is because they're impressionable again. Otherwise, they're going to create their own identity, and that's what they're going to form later in life. Whereas if you push them into one of these now, make them think it's normal, or even that they're being rewarded for jumping into that camp, then you're going to have a lot higher percentage of them doing that before they're able to really understand and make decisions on their own.
Yeah, and it's upsetting that you have teachers trying to groom kids, you have Disney trying to groom kids, and it's great that people like Ron DeSantis are trying to actually fight back against that, and he's not falling in. Because again, the whole libertarian argument is like the government needs to stay out of things, and if only the government stayed out of things, everything would be better in the world. But here's a perfect example of like Ron DeSantis, who's a Republican, who's probably typically in favor of small government, right? Limited government and allowing people to have freedom. But he recognizes that when a company is trying to groom children, that is something inherently evil. And that company, not just the practice of grooming kids, but that entire company should be sanctioned, right? He's not saying, we'll only take away, the tax breaks from Disney that they have, the special tax breaks, if they stop grooming kids. He's like, no, this is an evil company. We need to sanction them as much as possible, take away their privileges that we've given them, add more regulation onto them, add more taxes onto them so that they can be like other companies. Because right now they're getting special tax breaks. They want to take that away from Disney, so everyone has to be, that Disney's on the same playing field as everyone else. That is a good thing, in my opinion, that DeSantis is doing.
Yeah. And people also do have to understand like just about how much money this is that you're talking with Disney. When I lived in Florida, I remember, and I don't remember. I wish I could remember if this was to the bottom line or in general, but the theme parks alone, from January to March, had already put their first $1 billion. I'm pretty sure it was to the bottom line.
Wow.
Um, and this, again, this legislation is shining a light on it, is having an effect. I saw a poll from the Trafalgar Group that 68% of people they survey are less likely to do business or buy products that Disney makes or Disney pushes, just because of this grooming issue that's come up. They don't buy the that it was a "Don't Say Gay" bill now that they've been educated on it,
Yeah.
and they really see Disney's actions as interfering with their parenting. That they are out there to cause problems and interfere with their kids. They don't see what they're doing as a positive thing.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what it is. And the thing is, I made a short video about this on TikTok the other day where, this person on Twitter was like, if you want to boycott Disney, you're also going to have to boycott. And there's like a list of all these networks and products and stuff like Star Wars or ESPN. And I'm like, I literally do not consume any of these products. And now I can feel good about not even consuming them. I'm more than happy to boycott all those. So I shared it around, and we got a big group of people boycotting all Disney products now, which is great.
Yeah, well, I think Disney's got a full-on case of brainworms now anyway, with all the things they're trying to cancel and all their history they basically just want to leave behind or rewrite. Apparently, they want to get rid of Tinkerbell and Captain Hook because they are potentially problematic and perpetuating negative stereotypes. I'm struggling to figure out what
Yeah,
these are.
I don't know. I
Don't
have no idea.
don't go into piracy, maybe?
I With the pirate, I don't know if it's like the hooked hand. He kind of looks like Italian or something. Is that like were Italians pirates? I don't even know who the pirates were. I don't know what ethnic group they were, but I don't know what the Tinkerbell thing could be. I'm totally at a loss for that.
Yeah, I have nothing on this. Like, I don't know. Maybe the hook hand. They feel like it's making fun of the disabled or something. Or sorry, differently
May,
abled.
yeah, maybe. Like I've never watched this show. I wasn't really into Disney movies when I was a kid. I thought they were kind of gay, but
Yeah,
is there maybe it's like not Tinkerbell and Captain Hook, but what is this like Peter Pan? Is that what the movie is?
yeah. This is Peter Pan, and actually, like, this is one of the Disney movies I saw as a kid that was pretty good. But this is also back before they were making a bunch of woke garbage. And I do feel like classic Disney movies, they are something good to show your kids. That it is, most of them have some kind of moral to the story. It's not, there's no built-in degenerate message.
Right. Yeah, I'm more of a boring person. I'd make my kids watch like World War II documentaries or something like that. But nevertheless, I think
Yeah,
with Peter Pan, I may have actually seen that when I was really young, like 3 or 4 or whatever. But I don't know, like, is there any stereotypical character in the whole movie? If it's like, would the Captain Hook guy be the only one that is unique?
I've got nothing on this, and there unfortunately like wasn't really a great explanation in this article of why they're getting rid of the characters.
There never is.
No, 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 like nothing I could even remotely understand. But I've also seen before where like they've canceled different movies or gotten rid of scenes from movies, and some of it I do understand when you look at some of the stuff from like the 40s or 50s, where yeah, it is a pretty bad like presentation of like a black person in like Fantasia or some of these scenes that they've altered.
Yeah.
Those I kind of get, but a lot of these other ones recently, it's just woke garbage. Again, there's no reason to cancel Tinkerbell or Captain Hook that I'm aware of.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I believe it was Barry Goldwater who was like this black, like kind of thought leader, political activist, and
Yes.
he actually said, I think it was him, it could have been someone else, but I remember this from my political theory class years ago. I think he made the argument that like civil rights is now just becoming. He said this way back in like the 1950s or 60s, but civil rights just includes now whatever we want it to mean and whatever any special interest group wants it to mean. So when like that made sense with like black Americans. Oh, they want civil rights, like the right to vote or whatever. Okay, that makes sense. But then people started shifting like in the 60s and 70s to just like, well, civil rights is like my right to smoke weed. We're hippies. We deserve civil rights. And now it's like, we're the gays. We deserve civil rights too. And it's like, what do you guys think that civil rights even means? Do you think that just means like, oh, we want to do X, so we're going to call X civil rights, so you have to give it to us? And people really play on that emotion. So I think it may be something similar with Disney where it's like, maybe there's some legitimate cases in the past, as in like 70 years ago past. But the
Exactly.
issue is that they're still using the same language from 70 years ago today, and it's become so broad and subjective that something like, what's the word they used in here? Perpetuating negative stereotypes. Like maybe there's a time when that would have been like, normal or whatever, or like, what's the word I'm looking for? Appropriate to say. But today, we're so far off track that like now we're seeing like the inclusion of LGBT propaganda within Disney movies because that's framed as a civil rights issue, or we have to stop perpetuating negative stereotypes, or whatever flowery language they want to use.
Yeah, because it isn't really about civil rights anymore. It's about special rights. Everybody wants special rights and
Yeah.
privileges for their in group. They want a way to lord power over others, over normal, you know, heterosexual couples or any group. They just want some kind of law or privilege that they can use to sue or to exert force or power. Um, it stopped being about equality and real civil rights a long time ago. I feel like most of those concerns have really been addressed. It doesn't mean you can't find like an individual racist or bad example out there, but by and large, there's nothing built in that's systematic at this point. You're never going to get rid of all the individuals that want to stand in your way, no matter who you are,
Well,
or
yeah,
what. Yeah,
and it's like the opposite too. If there's any type of systematic discrimination, it's clearly against white people, like affirmative action. It also affects Asians,
yeah,
but it's like, you're saying these two people have the same scores, but just because one is white, that is the sole reason they don't deserve to get into the school. But yet the black person who has the same score, or potentially even a lower score, they can get into the school because they're black, right? It's solely on the basis of their race or Hispanic or whatever. And it's
yeah,
like that is a clear example of discrimination based on race. And I know conservatives talk about it frequently, but we should really be pushing this issue because it would force the left into a corner where they would have to say, well, yeah, it's discrimination against whites, but you guys deserve it, because that's what
yeah,
they actually think.
yeah,
Everything else they say is just to try to get us closer to the point where we are being discriminated against legally. And when they finally have it, like an affirmative action, there are other cases like with mortgage lending, subprime mortgage lending. There are other cases with not affirmative action, but like these like diverse hiring practices in the workplace with lawsuits. If a minority is fired from the workplace, not only ethnically but also like let's say someone who's LGBT and they get fired from the workplace, any of these minority groups can sue the employer saying, oh, it's because of discrimination. So there's a lot of different examples of how white straight male men, white straight males. The COVID has taken a big toll
yeah.
on me here. I'm running on 2 hours of sleep. Please forgive me for my rambling here. But these people are being disenfranchised. I hate that word because the left uses it. But there is clear and concise examples of like legal discrimination against white straight men in this country.
Well, it is the right term, and the left overuses it. And what they want now isn't, they don't want to fix discrimination, they want revenge. It isn't about fixing a real
Yeah.
problem for them anymore. It's about, again, having force over others. Um, and, whoops, did our thing not work? Um, right now, again, the left, they need to gain ground somewhere because people are seeing through a lot of these things they've been pushing right now with um, the anti-grooming bills and other legislation that we see finally moving forward, pushing back against abortion in several states now. So they're desperate. Chuck Schumer said this recent loan repayment pause isn't enough. Instead, they want to cancel student debt forever. I see this just as a desperate push to try to get the young interested in the Democrats again because there are polling numbers again where they're just falling off a cliff with everybody, including younger voters, and that's usually their one holdout, their stronghold. That even though younger voters don't make it out to the polls as much as other voting demographic groups, they still are a reliable Democrat vote. So if they're collapsing within those numbers, that's no bueno for the left. They're going to have to find a lot of dead people to make it to the polls this year.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I wouldn't even necessarily, it's like with the framing of this, it's so poor because you're right. They're only doing this for votes. Like that is their sole intention. So they're like, ironically, if anything, they would probably be like, let's cancel the debts of all the gender studies kids and all the music majors, right? Because those are the ones who are the most liberal. But,
Yeah,
you know, ideally, if we were going to cancel anyone's student debt, it should be like graduated people with STEM degrees, like you graduated with a JD or a medical, degree, or something like this, or like an engineering degree,
Yeah.
and not like, oh, you started your like, dance class major, you started your dance major, and then you dropped out after 3 years and you're 100 grand in debt. Like that person does not, absolutely not deserve their debt canceled. But at least there's an argument for people who are going to contribute great amounts to this economy. But then even in that case, if you contribute that much, like you're a doctor or lawyer, you're probably making a lot of money and you can just pay back your loans quickly and easily.
Well, not to mention, like a lot of people that do have actually useful degrees. Like I have a friend that just got his master's in nursing, and the hospital he works for, as long as he maintains his employment there for 4 years, they're going to pay back the hundred and some odd $1,000 that he spent on this degree, and
Right.
it improves his pay. I know other people have gotten engineering degrees and work with large manufacturing companies, and same deal. They sign a contract to work there for 5 years, and then the company repays 100% of their student loan, plus what the payments that they made in the meantime while working there.
Yeah. And there's a lot of like even small companies that you could
Hmm.
work at starting today, like Starbucks, McDonald's, I think does this, where you can just be some like 18-year-old and start working there. And as long, I don't know the conditions exactly, but I think many of them are partnered with Arizona State University because it's an online program and it's probably really easy and cheap. And yeah, you'll pay your way through a 4-year degree if you work at one of these companies and you enter into this agreement. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of options to get free education. And I don't know why everyone keeps complaining about education costs, because like I don't like, for the younger people who have been in college recently, like myself, if you qualify for FAFSA, which is the financial student aid on the federal level, you get like all your tuition paid for plus more money. Like they will pay for your tuition and then they'll give you cash and then you can do whatever you want with it. You can go buy like, you know, booze with it like most college kids do, or books or whatever. Like I don't know where this big, oh, I don't have money for school thing is coming from. For your 4-year degree, for your first 4 years in school, for your bachelor's degree, I don't know how, unless you're like not a citizen, you can't just get through school using the financial federal aid.
Well, if you're not a citizen, there's plenty of other groups that will pay for 100% of it.
Yeah,
So,
that's true too. Master's degrees and PhDs, FAFSA, I don't think pays for.
no.
But like that's at that point, I would hope that you're studying in a profession that you're going to make quite a lot back and you can pay back your 20, 30, 40 grand or whatever in debt.
Yeah. Well, I think that's again where the key problem is these people that are in college for 8 years getting their doctorate in underwater basket weaving with a side of grievance studies.
Yeah.
And then they go out in the real world and figure out they can't get a job, or
Yeah.
the only job that they can get is, saying, "Would you like fries with that?"
Yeah.
Making, basically minimum wage,
Yeah.
$15 an hour or less.
And it's insane because like I have 2 degrees and like a few like certifications. I'm very like overqualified insofar as like my academics compared to most 22-year-olds. But yet I've never got a job with any of my degrees ever. And I've had some great paying jobs and it's always been because of connections and my personability. Luckily, I didn't have COVID when I applied for these jobs because I clearly cannot talk while I have it. But it's because I'm a personable person and I'm friendly and I'm nice and I'm easy to get along with. Even liberals like me in person. I'm a very likable guy. So this is the way that I've always got jobs. I've never got one because I'm like, here's my degree. Now give me a job. There are certainly some jobs, maybe like computer science or whatever. But even then, I've heard of like these coders who never went to school. They just learned to code in high school and then they
Yep.
go work for like 200 grand a year at some company.
Yeah, I know several people that work within the programming industry, and some of them have told me like people coming out of college are unprepared, and that's part of why you have this big push for foreign labor there and H-1B visas and other foreign visas, is because
Mhm.
our colleges don't get it. When people come out of our schools with a masters in computer engineering, they're like 3 or 4 years behind to whatever's current. Whereas
Wow.
someone that's going to school in India, the curriculum changes twice a year because they want people learning whatever is
Wow.
current and useful in the market. So they can get out of college and hit the ground running. Maybe they have to pick up a few little skills here and there that's specific to whatever industry they're getting into.
English.
Yeah, yeah. Coherent English. I'm going to just keep my mouth shut there. Um, but yeah, like either way, they might be hard to understand, but at least they can do the job.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's like, why is America not doing that? But
No.
that's the thing is like a lot of these jobs nowadays, you don't need a fancy degree for, and it's upsetting to see that like there are problems with our education system in America But the Democrats don't care about that. The Republicans don't care about it because the Republicans can't ever use government to improve the lives of people. And the Democrats claim to want to use the government to improve the lives of people. But in reality, they're only doing whatever is necessary to get them more votes. So when it comes to something like student loans or, the admission into various institutions, it's like we're not able to tackle any of these problems because one side is too scared to talk about it and the other side is just trying to get more votes from it. Neither is very interested in helping the American people with these issues.
Well, the real purpose of politics and political power is to reward your friends and punish your enemies. And our side doesn't look at it that way. Once we get power, we want to play nice and we want to reach a hand out to the left, try to bring them into the fold when they would never do that for us. If we get any committee seats or anything else, you're pushed down. They don't want to hear your views. They run it according to their agenda, and I can't be mad at them for that because that's what we should be doing as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I get frustrated when conservatives will say things like, well, we can't do it because the left will do it to us. And it's like, no. The left has always taken more power than they're allowed to have and used it against us. Look at Obama with DACA. The president himself signed an executive order that totally overhauled our immigration system. He allowed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants into this country to stay here legally and receive like financial aid for school and food stamps and welfare if necessary. They could go to public schools legally, and they're on a pathway to citizenship. And even a lot of Republicans are saying, yeah, let's keep all the DACA kids and stuff. President Obama, on his own, just as one man, changed our entire immigration system to allow this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in that shouldn't be here and never should have been here. But yet, then we say, but Trump can't build a wall because, well, the left will use immigration against us one day. Guys, like literally 2 years ago, Obama did this against us. Can we please, for the love of all things holy, now use the power for ourselves?
Well, with DACA, what's even crazier, at least in my view, is even the courts said that what Barack Obama did was illegal, but then they wouldn't let Trump do anything to fix it. They basically said it was, this is legal precedence. It wouldn't be right to now like evict these people from our country, which I don't understand.
What?
Yeah.
And here's the crazy part. There's legal precedent for deporting people from this country. The U.S., even as early as the 1900s, okay, get this, we're taking citizenship away from people who were not white because the original immigration documents signed in this country all the way up till the 1900s said you had to be white or from Europe to move to America. So even in the 1900s, this guy served in World War I for the Americans, risked his life to fight for our country, and he was from Indian. And his argument when he went to court is, no, I'm white because I'm technically Caucasian, which is like part of the white race, right? And the Supreme Court of America was like, no, you're not white enough. They took his citizenship away and sent him to India.
Yeah, it's really terrible considering somebody that actually went out and fought for our country and everything else.
Yeah, so I mean, whether that's good or bad or whatever is besides the point, but it's like there is precedent from the courts that like we can deport people for just about any reason.
Well, this is the other thing too. Like we've paused immigration as recently. When was the last time? It was in the 1960s, I think, where we halted all immigration to give people time to assimilate. Maybe not all immigration, but the bulk of immigration. We've cut it down several times throughout our history where we just closed that faucet off because people need time to assimilate. Doesn't matter where they're coming from. If all of a sudden we took on 2 million people out of the Ukraine, it'd be the same problem. You'd have all these little groups pop up that they didn't speak any English. They can't integrate with the rest of our society, and that forces them to always be second-class citizens because they can't do the same thing that everybody else can.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point too, because although I think that like Europeans could probably assimilate much easier into America just because of a variety of reasons and closer cultural values and such, among other things, I also think that the reason that like Ukraine is a country and America is a country is because they are different peoples. And I don't actually believe, I've heard some people make the argument like, oh, America should be open to all Europeans and America should just be a big like European state and anyone from Europe can come. And I disagree with that. I don't think America is Africa. I don't think America is Asia. I don't think America is Europe. I don't think that if we moved in every British person to America, that we would get along. In fact, there was a big war over this a few hundred years ago, right? So I think that these conflicts arise because we're different peoples. And although maybe we have more in common with like the average European than the average African or Asian or Middle Eastern or whatever, whether it's because of religion or common heritage or whatever, we still are different peoples. And for that reason, I think we should have national sovereignty, just like the Ukrainians and Poles and Germans and people from England have.
Yeah, agreed. Because again, there is something that makes us different. It is the language, borders, and culture that make us a country. And the values of somebody, say, from Finland or from France or wherever, those are going to be different than ours too. Their way of life, the way they go about things day to day, what they want from their political system. And it doesn't mean that one's better than the other in those examples,
Right.
but they are just different ways of doing things. And that means that we are not going to align on everything. So you
Yeah.
do need somebody that wants to come from another country and wants to be here. They need to also want to integrate into our system and bring something that's actually useful to us, not just be a burden on the people that already live here.
Right. And that's the unfortunate thing is all the people who want to move to America, not all, but the vast majority of people who want to move to America are not coming here because they're like, I love America and I want to make it the best country on earth. They're moving here because they're like, I want a better life. I want more money. I want a safer place to live. All those are fine for yourself. But like as a country, we should look out for our national interest, not the interest of some random person in another country. You know, it makes sense why these people try to move here. Doesn't make sense to me why the country allows them in.
No, it but again, it's I think it's part guilt and part willing destruction of our country that they want
Yeah.
things. They want us to not be a cohesive group.
Right.
Um, we'll jump into our next story here. If you work for Yelp, they'd like to help you too. They want to help you. They want to help you kill your baby before they're born.
It's insane.
Yeah.
This story is absolutely nuts. I have heard nothing about this. I think I'm going to write an article about this on my website because this is actually nuts. I'm reading an article right now on this topic here. And it says here, Yelp, this is from bizpackreview.com. It says a Yelp executive said, women need access to abortion to be successful at work as the company announced it would fund travel expenses for employees traveling out of state for abortions. So here again, like libertarian seething, this is a company who is saying, well, having families and kids isn't great for workplace productivity, so we'll help you kill your baby so you can put in more hours at the workplace.
Exactly, and then the Yelp's doing this because it's a virtue signaling because of the laws that
Yeah.
have passed in Texas and Oklahoma and other places now that have changed abortion to like 15 weeks or less, or outlawed it basically altogether, as in the Oklahoma bill. So they're trying to reach out to the base because again, like the Democrats are in trouble. Let's go over some stats real quick. I mean, I have the obvious stuff like groceries are up 10% right now. People's 401ks are crashing. I saw some really interesting poll numbers in a story we're actually not going to get to today, but so the Democrat support within different groups is just cratering right now. So Hispanic support for the Democrat Party, what if you give me a guess, what do you think it's down right now? And this is in a Quinnipiac poll. So this is a major organization that gives they are on the liberal side, but they do give fairly accurate polling data.
I'll say 14%.
Multiply that by 4, 61% drop in support in the last 15 months from Hispanics that they polled. You know, if they would vote for Biden again, do they approve or disapprove? 61% drop.
Didn't like 70% of them vote for Biden, though? Does that mean only 9% still approve
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
or would vote?
yeah, I think I think it is right around 70%. I think it was 68 or pretty close to it.
I think my math is incorrect there, or my statistical analysis, but nevertheless,
We'll blame the COVID.
yeah, it is. Honestly, it is the COVID. Like I'm totally out of my mind right now. But I even told Mike's like, "Yo, if you need to take a day off,
Yeah.
AJ, don't worry." I'm like, the show must go on. I roll myself out of bed. There's like, I'm not gonna go into detail about how sick I was and all the grossness that came along with COVID. I had a particularly bad case of it. But I roll myself out of bed and show up here just to be incoherent. But nevertheless, the show must go on.
That's right.
And regardless of statistical methods, what is important is that support for the Democrats is dropping, which is great news. I love to hear it.
Yeah, and again, like the survey points to this as cultural issues. We did an episode before we kind of touched on this where a lot of Hispanics, like tend to be very religious people. A lot of them are Catholic or involved in the evangelical church in the South, and they aren't necessarily interested in like welfare benefits. They don't want a huge flood of illegal aliens coming up here. So they are already with the right to a certain extent on that, but then when they start seeing like this cultural absolute degeneracy with the grooming and abortion and everything else,
Yeah.
they don't like that. So
Well,
if
it's
you when you have this like just complete collapse of support within that base and it's spreading like this, they've got to be really, really concerned. The other the other thing to worry about is people tend to move to the right. They tend to start on the left politically and
right.
move to the right. It isn't as often you see a shift to the left where somebody stays there. They might for an election cycle because somebody's corrupt or whatever, but they don't stick around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. I was actually just talking to someone about this today. If you were to have control of the media, you could really shift narratives in a big way. And one of the ways that it would be interesting to do this is if you were to kind of push to Hispanics that there are like obviously different types of Hispanics, and we like the upper class, fancy Hispanics who assimilate and get jobs, and that they should not like the lower class. I don't have a better word, but kind of like this lower class Hispanics who just want to move here, and like people like an MS-13 or people who just move here and go on welfare and have 10 kids. And it would be great to like not like sow division, but give an understanding to Hispanic Americans that there is this big difference between them and them, like us and them kind of thing, right? Because right now what the media is pushing is the exact opposite. It's pushing unity. Like, oh, all Hispanics are the same. If you're Hispanic, you got to vote for your Hispanic brothers. If you're Hispanic, you got to stand up for everyone who's Hispanic. And in fact, they take it a step further and say, like, anyone who's not white is in a person of color coalition. And it's like, if we could just give the truth to a lot of Hispanic voters or black voters or these minority voters and be like, hey, look, you guys are usually different from all the people who want to come here. If you're here and you're Hispanic and you own a business, odds are that like you're the one out of the 99 Hispanics who are coming here to actually do quite good work in the US. And I want you to understand that like you probably shouldn't vote for pro-immigration because you're part of the like American fold, and these people coming here are not coming here to be like you.
Yeah, and I think that is what a lot of people see, especially people that can't. I lived in Florida obviously for a long time, and when you have people that come here from Cuba to leave a communist system, they're not jumping on a raft made of coolers and risking their life to come here because they want to tap into our welfare system. They just want an opportunity to be free to start a business and everything else. I used to work for a guy that came over here when he was 6 years old on a raft, and now owns a multi-million-dollar staffing company based out of Florida.
Right. And I'd be interested to see if like Cuban Americans have any type of like not like allegiance, but kind of like kinship to like Mexican Americans or like Guatemalans or El Salvadorians or whatever. Like I wonder if there's any type of connection. Like, oh, we're both Hispanic, or if it's like well, we're Cubans, we like Cubans, we don't like any other country.
Well, my experience down there was there were a lot of people that didn't like people from either certain countries in South America or in general. It's not viewed like we may say like Hispanic, but they view everybody as being
Right.
you're from this country or that country, and certain ones definitely have certain reputations. I dated a person for a couple of years that was her parents from Bolivia, and again, her father came here with nothing and built up several very successful businesses because he wanted opportunity and saw the direction that Bolivia was headed.
Right.
So there are people that we want, but right now, regardless, we have to shut the faucets off now, get things under control, move the illegals out that are depressing wages, adding crime, dragging drugs across the board. We have to fix the problem before we can be nice and let other people that are going to benefit our society in.
And that was kind of like my point is like one of the ways we can do that is obviously, I think for the most part, a lot of like white Americans are on board with this idea of like build a wall, right? Obviously you have a ton of liberals, but as far as like conservatives, we're all on board with build a wall, limit immigration, but with Hispanic Americans who are increasingly becoming more of a important voting bloc to consider, it's like that would be one of a good strategy to consider to get them to be opposed to immigration is by saying like, look, the immigration policy isn't anti-Mexican or anti-Hispanic in general. It's anti-bad Mexican. It's anti-bad Hispanics. And you guys are the good ones, okay? So vote for the wall, if we could, like, convince them in that way.
Well, I think most of them do understand that, too. Like, again, like I have a lot of extended family that's from Brazil and Chile. Same thing. Like, they are not exactly thrilled with a flood of people coming up from Mexico and Ecuador and everywhere else that are here just to tear our system down or, again, milk us dry through the welfare system. Like, I don't understand how you can get on our welfare rolls without proving that you're a U.S. citizen to begin with.
Yeah,
Like,
I have no idea, but and it's just confusing to me because like I've met quite a lot of Hispanic people who like you said understand these things and
yeah,
agree with us on these topics. But then it's like, well, why does 70% of them vote Democrat then? Because that's like an extremely large number for, if the majority of these individuals understand the importance of immigration and things like Trump ran on immigration, that was his biggest thing. And at no point was Trump ever framing it as like an anti Mexican thing or anti-Hispanic thing or anti-African Asian whatever thing.
yeah.
But yet still, he only got what like 20 something percent of the Hispanic vote in that election.
Yeah, well, but it did grow from election to election from 2016 to 2020. His numbers among Hispanics actually went up because, again, a lot of them do see it's an effective policy. That's what they're voting for. And they don't buy this hype that the average person, I don't think, buys the hype that somehow putting a wall up is racist. We're doing that to,
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
well, so one thing that I've kind of had like bouncing around in my mind since we were saying this is I kind of wonder if that like is kind of that default Democrat position, just like it is with younger voters. That you have a high
Mm.
percentage of Hispanics that vote Democrat because that's what they've always done, and maybe at a point, if you go back to the 60s or 70s, their political views did more closely align with the Democrat Party. But again, as they've gotten crazier and crazier and moved further to the left to like full-on communism and socialism, where they're at today, where they're really authoritarians,
Yeah.
the modern left, they see that their values don't align. So you are going to start to see them shift out of that.
Yeah, well, here's like the one of the most important things I've noticed lately is that one of the reasons I think the left and right are becoming so polarized is because we're becoming so multicultural in this country. We're flooding our country with so many different peoples who have different values and histories and heritage and lifestyles, etc. That with all of these different groups, you're never ever going to find a government system that can appease all of them, especially if it's some democratic system where you have like, let's say there's 10 different groups of people in your country and each of them elect a representative who will represent their group. Well, you're going to get to Congress and guess what? You're never going to get a majority because it's always going to be like 1/10 of the vote on any given issue, right? Now, maybe there's going to be some coalition building, but even then, the odds of getting a majority is pretty slim. Even if you did get a majority, guess what? Half the country is probably going to get the short end of the stick, right? You're seeing this in America now with white people getting the short end of the stick, with people of color, which is like the coalition of non-white people doing things like advocating for affirmative action or, the government allowing BLM rights to go on or things like this. There are other examples, but the point being is that with all of these various groups having their own group interests in America, the odds of a democratic system working properly for any of them is extremely low, and it's getting lower and lower day by day, which is why the left correctly figured out the best way to run this country for our own interest is to have an authoritarian system where we can just lock up Trump supporters and we can disenfranchise white people and take away rights from Christians and expand abortion and all and LGBT stuff and all these anti-Christian policies. Now the right is, I think, in my mind, correctly coming to the same position of we need to be authoritarian ourselves, because if we allow ourselves to just continue to vote for what we want and the enemies will just use the government and corporations and any type of other authority and force to use against us, we will be defeated. So what the right needs to do, and this is what's happening naturally, is the left and the right are being polarized and they're both moving to a more authoritarian standpoint. The left just had a head start because they started doing this in what, like 2015,
Oh, before
2014?
that, I think, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it could go way back. Some people would say with FDR and like the New Deal,
Well,
you could go way back. But, really this push for authoritarianism can be observed in the last decade, on full drive or whatever, overdrive. And the right being polarized as well because we're being pushed by the left. The left is pushing us into a corner with all these radical policies. We're becoming, aware of the fact that we ourselves need to be authoritarian or fanatic or whatever word you want to use, that we can put an end to these insane policies, because it's not going to come through voting for one person or the other in most cases, especially as the country becomes more divided and more multicultural and group identity.
yeah. I think the left views political power, or a lot of the voters on the left view political power as a means to take from those that they disagree with. So they want to use it as a way to steal from business owners, people on the right. They want to seize property. They want higher taxes. They want access to something that you have, one way or another. That they
Wow.
see it as a means of quasi leveling the playing field. Whereas
Yeah.
we want to live more under the rule of law, where things are the same
Right.
for everybody, everybody's treated the same, which is ultimately where we need to be. But until we clean out this cancer, we
Yeah.
can't be that way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's something that's very important to note is like the right is in favor of free speech, not just because it's some principle, not just because it's the First Amendment and we love our Constitution. We stand for free speech because we believe that we are saying the truth and the truth will prevail. So if we have an open dialogue, people will just come to our side. That's why we don't need to censor, right? When it comes to other issues, justice, like you said, law and order. The reason why we say let's just make the same law for everyone because our people, are not going to commit all these crimes and not going to do all these unjust things. And if they do, they're going to get punished accordingly. The left doesn't believe in justice. They want it to be relative. They need to
Yes.
give more leadway to people they like because they know the people that they represent are going to be committing more crime. Or like think about the BLM riots versus the January 6th thing. A conservative would be like, well, let's just have, same sentence for anything. Oh, trespassing? Okay, trespassing, right?
Yeah.
Burning down a building? Okay, maybe that should be a little more harsh of a sentence, right? So we stand for free speech and we stand for law and order because we believe that we are following the truth and that we believe in justice and so on. But I wanted to just finish up talking about this abortion case because there's a lot of info in this article I'm seeing here before we end off.
We got a little sidetracked there.
Yeah, it was a good rant though. And now I'm a little more recovered from my COVID here, so maybe I'll be able to give my thoughts more concisely here. So apparently Yelp has always provided medical funding or whatever, or insurance funding for abortion. But now what they're doing, like we mentioned before, is they're actually paying for the travel expenses for women. It says here also that the Yelp Foundation matched employee contributions with double the original donation to pro-abortion organizations, including the Center for Reproduction Rights, the NARAL, pro-choice.
Yeah.
What does that stand for? National Abortion Rights.
Reproductive. Yeah, I can't remember now. I know, but yeah, it is they're a national pro-abortion group.
Okay, the Lilith Fund and Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas 2021. I guess they have a whole division just for Texas. And I mean, there's more in this article, but I mean, one other thing of note I wanted to mention from this too is apparently the CEO of Yelp, the reason why he made it a point to manually review 2,000 abortion clinics and pregnancy crisis care centers is because the Yelp CEO saw an episode of, get this, John Oliver's show, where John Oliver claimed that some pregnancy crisis care centers, meaning the Christian ones, were deceiving women by not telling them that they don't offer abortion. So they would say, oh, if you're pregnant and you need help, come see us. So maybe some women want to have abortions, maybe some don't, but they go to this clinic and they say, look, we don't offer abortion, but we're going to give you money if you need it. We can give you baby clothes. We have diapers, bottles. If you need to adopt your baby, we'll help you have your baby put up for adoption. Whatever you need, we're here for you. So this guy, John Oliver says that's wrong because they're deceiving women that they can't have abortions. The CEO hears this on John Oliver's show and then says, we can't allow any travel expenses to be paid to those places. We only want to pay for abortion and for the travel expenses for women who get abortion. So if you're not killing your baby, we're not paying for you if you're pregnant to go anywhere for help.
Again, that's insane. And I just don't understand why this is such a big issue for the left, that why at all costs it has to be supported, that there's no negotiation on it, that any even slight pushback against so-called abortion rights is met like it's like literally putting people back in chains or something.
Yeah, I know, which it's like, it's just insane to me how this issue has become so accepted and popular because, it's like it's literally killing a baby. I don't know how anyone could not understand that. And I've heard some people make the arguments. These are like kind of, I don't agree with these arguments. Some people have said, oh, well, the people who get abortions are usually like the lower IQ kind of trashy people in society. And because like we don't want trailer trash kids running around in the trailer parks, so they should have abortions. Then even then, I don't think that's a justified reason to end a baby's life. But at least that's a reason more than the liberal kind of argument, which is like her body, her choice. It's like that's not even an argument. Like there's no logic.
Yeah,
at least the other argument, there's like a 1, 2, 3 logical explanation. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's moral or just, but at least there's reason to it. Unlike the liberal one. I don't know how all these Americans have bought into it though.
Yeah. Well, there's people like legitimately think that like somehow not growing up at all is better than growing up poor or in a bad neighborhood or
Right.
in difficult circumstances. But then at the same time, anybody that comes out of that and is successful, they're always heralded as overcoming all these things. Whereas this is
Right.
depriving people of that opportunity at all because you're just murdering them.
Yeah, and it's like it's one of the symptoms of liberalism that like happiness is the most important thing ever and your individual rights are the most important thing ever. And it's like, well, no, like mom can sacrifice some of her individual freedoms to carry a baby and give birth to it. Like that is actually okay to do. And happiness is not end all be all, and you may as well kill your own child because you suspect they may be unhappy in their life. Like it's absolutely absurd to me.
Well, yeah, things are going to be difficult for you for a short time because you made some bad choices. So why not just go kill the baby?
That's insane.
I thought this was interesting. So some of you may have seen recently, Tucker Carlson did a long form interview with a woman who had transitioned to a man, and then like a lot of people that do that, I think it's 40% or right around there. I know the numbers fluctuate a little bit. Went back to being a woman, was upset about all the lies, felt like she was pushed into it. Very good interview. I've only seen segments of it, but very compelling. And again, it's good information you can't get elsewhere. And that's because YouTube and other places disappear at the minute it's put up. So this video was too spicy for YouTube. They pulled it down.
Yep, so they're pulling down Tucker clips, and they've actually pulled down, obviously, we're just as effective as Tucker Carlson,
Yes.
because they pulled down one of our clips, too. One of
Our
our whole
last video.
shows, actually. Yeah, our last show, episode 7, I believe. They just pulled the whole thing. Forget this. Violent or graphic content, which there was literally none of at all. So we're going to upload all these to Odyssey, so you guys have to follow us on odyssey.com, punching left. Is it punching? Yeah, it's punching left there. So join us over on Odyssey to watch all of our content uncensored. You can see as much graphic and violent content from us there as you want. Of course, there is none actually. But YouTube is censoring Tucker. They're censoring us from the largest conservative talk show host to even the lonely old AJ and Mike. They're censoring as many conservatives as possible.
But yeah, so they can't allow any opposing viewpoint. They can't allow anybody out there that's an effective speaker. Because it could catch fire, and all of a sudden when people see this, they will start questioning the left and the narrative. And with all the losses they're taking on grooming right now, I think that's really the reason they did this. I think if the environment wasn't the way it is right now, where people are banding together, and we're talking about people that are... So this is what I think the left really feels right now. Is last year it was CRT, and you had a huge effect on all these school boards, starting with Loudoun County. And I think they are afraid that people are going to band together again and have further pushback against this agenda and solidify.
Let's go. I hope so. And one of the ways that you can help in your collectivization to fight the left is by subscribing to us on YouTube or following us, even better yet, following us on Odyssey, subscribing to us on Telegram, all of which can be found at punchingleft.com, which will be on the end screen here. And I think that's about all the time we have tonight. So thank you all for joining us live. Thank you all for watching the replay right now. We greatly appreciate it. Again, you can find us on everything at punchingleft.com. With all that said, thank you guys very much for joining. God bless each and every one of you, and take care.
That's right. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to start really pushing some things into high gear. We're going to start putting material up on Gab and on additional social media platforms. So check out our homepage, punchingleft.com, for any updates there, and then go follow us on some of these alternative platforms, because as this environment gets worse and worse, that's where we're going to have to be. So thanks again, and we'll see you guys again soon.